Hello everyone, welcome to my tutorial. This time I'll be teaching you how to make Fern stuff. To make this stuff, we'll be using Papagura for whole structure base. Papagura is a very useful software as it can help with unfolding 3D objects. But it was designed for paper which is thinner than foam, so some parts will need to modify a bit, and I'll show it later. The template can be purchased at my Etsy store at a very cheap price as a support for my channel, so be sure to check it out. Once gotten the template, first is to print them out on papers. Then what I usually like to do is stick them onto thicker cardstock. They will make the template more durable, but it is not necessary. For this build, to not confuse myself, I'm doing it piece by piece, and I will be using 5mm 65° hard EVA foam for this main structure. As usual, to get a clean cut, all you have to make sure is the blade is sharp and maintain your cutting angle. For the top part, also not to forget to do an inward slanted cut, so the top part can be covered perfectly later. After cutting the pieces out, start by attaching them from both ends, then slowly stick all the way in. This process is pretty long and is going to be repetitive, so please be patient and the result will turn out great. I also recommend using smaller dropper for super glue, for better control and much cleaner finishing. And the trick for dealing with excess glue is to wipe it off with small pieces of foam. Now when it comes to the angle part, I also did one side slanted cut, to give it a little bit sharp angle. After attaching this angle piece, I decided to leave it aside while working on the following piece, because it might end up being too long for me to turn around if I need it. After that, continue to work on the pieces until finish everything. Also, an additional tip here will be using a sandpaper to sand off the sticking surface will help with super glue adhesion. That's because some foam might be too smooth for the glue to grip on, so a little bit of sanding will help to roughen the surface and makes the adhesion much stronger. After finishing all the pieces, then it's time to connect them all. I first sand the foam with a sandpaper, then start to round it slowly. And I let the both ends stay open first because I think it will help with attaching the parts much easier. Next, just attach them with super glue. And now the main stuff structure is ready. Next, we'll be closing the both ends, and here will be the slight modifications happens. After tracing the template onto 1cm foam, I then manually enlarged slightly 2mm at the edges, and did inward slanted cut at the edge like this, so it will close the hole perfectly. Next, I use an aluminum tube as the inner support, because as soon as I attach everything, I realized the bottom is a little bit wobbly, so I insert the aluminum tube from the bottom and use hot glue to fix it in place. I first adjust it to the positions, then I pump a whole lot of hot glue in and let it cool for a few minutes before proceed to other part. After that, I open the middle seams like performing a surgery. I also make sure these are the parts that will be covered afterwards, in case the seams might look bad. Then I pump another lot of hot glue just to fix the aluminum tube in place. I did on both aluminum end and another 2 more spots in the middle. Once the hot glue is cold and hardened, and make sure everything is fine, I then close the gap and seal it with super glue. Now the bottom part is much more stable than my financial status. Nice! Next, also not to forget about closing the bottom end. I trace the exact size on the 5mm foam and then make inward slanted cut outside the tracing line. I also slide this part to widen the angle. After that, I sand the foam and stick it on with super glue. Next, I use a heat gun to shape the foam first so it will stay in a nice round shape. After that, it is time to add the wooden texture onto the stuff with a rotary tool. I first used a small piece of 5mm foam as a test piece because I wasn't really confident as well. I used a 240 grit sanding drum to cut, so the sanded details will be smoother. I must say it will take a little bit of practice, but generally the pattern is mostly random and a little bit like lightning spark. Now that I'm much more confident, I first start with the bottom tip and slowly work my way out. And you probably noticed the marking on the stuff. Those are the markings I used for identify the parts will be covered, so I don't do extra work. Carving these will take a while, so really have to be patient. Now the carving is done, it is time to add more details onto it. I use 15mm half dowel for this detail. I first measure it and cut it in size. Then I stick it on with super glue. I also seal the edge so it won't move around. For this part, I use the exact same template by extending the length a little bit. After cutting it down, I wrap it around the stuff and mark on the foam. Then I trim off the excess foam so it can fit nicely. As for the side, I use 1 cm half dowel foam for it. After that, I proceed to other ring and I also use the same method. Using the same template, extend the length and trim it to exact length. But I did not attach it onto the stuff because it has to be done later. Now move on to this. I use 1 cm foam as the base, then add on the details later on. First, I cut one side off to mark the sanding guide, then I remove the details on the template and mark them onto the foam. Then I use 2mm foam for this triangle detail. After that, for the smaller oval, I use 3mm foam and cut 12 of them. I mark the top side so I know which side has better cutting. So the other side will be sanded to round off the edges. After sanding is done, it should look like this. Now I attach the details on, followed by the guideline. As for the strap, I use 5mm half dowel foam. And then trim it manually like this. This will help with connecting all the pieces together. Next, attach the small oval details onto it as well. For the bigger oval, I also use the same half dowel foam and stick it followed by the guideline. After finishing the details, I use heat gun to soften the foam, then roll it and stick it. After that, slot the stuff into it. If it's too tight, using heat guns will help. Next, another heating before the paint job. Heating the foam will help with rounding the cuff gap and smoothen it. After that, I also sand the seams to smoothen it. Last but not least, I almost forget about this rivet. This is pretty simple because it's basically thumbtack. After that, I also add another piece of foam here so I can hook it while painting it. Next, I prime it with water-based paint because I have access to air compressor and spray gun. If you don't have access to this tool, you can use PVA glue or white glue. After priming it, I painted a layer of brown onto it. This is an oil-based paint, so had to make sure the water-based paint is fully dry before painting it. Then I watered down the water-based chocolate brown and brushed onto the to get the paint into the groove, then wipe it off with kitchen towel. This will leave the color in the groove. I repeat the same steps on the other part until I'm satisfied with the result. After that, I use Liquitex Heavy Body Rose Sienna, dry brushing onto the stuff to give it a little bit of shine. Additionally, you can also wipe off the excess if you think it's too much. Now to give the shade a little bit more variance, I use the Liquitex Heavy Body Max Black to darken the chocolate and randomly adds into the groove. By doing this will make the whole texture pop even more, and the paint is also watered down so I am still able to wipe off the excess. After that, I wet the kitchen towel and wipe the stuff in case there might be some spot that I missed out. Now that the wooden part is painted, we can proceed to the fabric part. I bought this purple fabric from the store and cut it into 4 cm strap. I also cut a few pieces because the width I bought is only 1 meter. Take the stuff and remove this foam. Then I use this double-sided tape to tape on the stuff. The tape has pretty strong holding power, so it is actually more than enough for taping the fabric. Then I run a quick test on the stuff and realize that one strap isn't enough. So I use my sewing machine to sew the strap together. After that, I added more tape and decided to start from the lower part. I folded the hanging part and wrap it around so it will stay in position. Now when it comes to the connection parts, I also trim a little bit so it will look nicer. Then continue to wrap it towards the end. Then I decided to wrap it back so the end can be covered by the ring later on. Now brings the ring back on. I've already primed it so I carefully cut along the seams and put it onto the stuff. After that, I glue it back with super glue. After the glue is dry, I adjust it to the correct position and cover the strap. And it should look like this. Now I cover the painted part with masking tape. I did recommend to use a good masking tape like 3M Scotch tape or a good painter's tape. After that, paint the silver parts. Remove the masking tape and hope everything is fine. After making sure everything is fine, it's time to do another wrapping. And just like before, I also did a test and attached it with double-sided tape. But as soon as I reached the end, I realized the strap wasn't enough, so I quickly add another piece and continue the wrapping progress. As for the end, I trimmed the strap and hid it inside the wrap. Now back to this hanging piece. I first fold it in half and trim it with a small scissor. Then use the same jewel I used for Frieren stuff and hand sew it on with a sofa thread. I also use a lighter to slightly burn the edge of the strap so it doesn't flare. After attaching the jewel, I also put a little bit of super glue to further enhance the durability. And now it is done.